My boy built a treehouse with his granddad. One morning, we got up and found it completely gone, chopped to bits with a chainsaw. The neighbor claimed it was unsafe and said it blocked their view. I didn't argue. I just got in the car, drove a couple towns over, picked something up, and waited for night to fall. We moved to Maple Ridge, Ohio, not long after the divorce. I needed a clean break from city life. Too much noise, too many reminders, and hardly any room for Mason to just be a kid. So I found us a quiet little 2-bedroom place on a calm street, with a decent backyard and a massive old sycamore tree that looked like it had stood guard for a century. My dad moved in about 6 months later. He was alone too. Mom had passed on years ago, and he never found it in him to remarry. He wasn't a talker, but he was always up to something out in the garage. Tools hung up neat and proud, like he was paying respect to them. When he said he wanted to build something with Mason, I figured it was just a weekend project. I thought they'd slap together a few boards and call it a fort, but it turned into their thing. Every weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, they'd be out there from morning to sundown, cutting, drilling, laughing. Mason was only 8, but the way he followed instructions, you'd think he was twice that. He measured everything twice, just like my dad showed him. Learned how to level the ground, anchor the supports, and brace each corner right. They didn't buy a prefab kit. They didn't take shortcuts either. They built it all by hand, from the ground up. Took them 5 weekends to get it done. They even added a little deck with a railing and a trapdoor with a ladder. Painted it red and blue, Mason's idea. He named it the Watchtower. Even made a sign for it. Inside, they put 2 fold-out chairs, a flashlight, a walkie-talkie, and my dad's old army binoculars. The night they finished it, Mason begged to spend the night out there. We let him. I checked in twice during the night. He was fast asleep with the flashlight still on in his hand. That night meant everything to him. Then 3 days later, I went outside early with my coffee, just like I always did, and that's when I saw the wreckage. It wasn't just taken down. It was obliterated. Smashed to pieces. Bits of painted wood scattered across the yard. Sharp splinters all over the grass. The deck? Shattered. The ladder? Gone. Even the tree, our old sycamore, had deep gashes near the bottom, like someone had gone at it with a chainsaw. It looked like a storm had torn through. But the skies had been calm all night. I was still trying to wrap my head around it when I heard someone behind me. It was a hazard. And it blocked our view, the voice said. I turned around. It was Mr. Whitaker, our neighbor. Standing there in his driveway, cool as ever, like nothing had happened. He wore his usual khakis and a neatly tucked-in button-up. Not a hair out of place. His wife, Ellen, was behind him with that tiny lapdog of theirs. I couldn't speak at first. My brain just stalled. All I could do was stare. He said, "You should have gotten a permit. That thing was a lawsuit waiting to happen." Then he added, "And it was an eyesore." After that, he just turned and walked back inside. Like it was no big deal. I stood there, not moving, coffee growing cold in my hand. That treehouse wasn't just some backyard toy. It was a bond, something my dad and my son built with their own hands. It was time. It was effort. It meant something. And Whitaker tore it all down like it was trash. I didn't scream. I didn't call the cops. I already knew how this kind of thing worked in towns like ours. He had money. Knew people on the city council. Even if I filed a complaint, it'd go nowhere. They'd claim it was on his property, or some legal technicality. So I went back inside. Sat down at the kitchen table. Then I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out. I drove a couple towns over to meet up with someone I hadn't seen in years. We weren't exactly friends, but we had history. I'd helped him once. Now it was time for him to return the favor. I came back home with something heavy in the trunk. It was wrapped under a tarp. One of those things that doesn't raise questions when you use it right. That night I didn't sleep. Just waited. Sat in the dark living room until long after midnight. No lights. No TV. Just the sound of the fridge humming and the occasional creak as the house settled. Mason was asleep in my bed. He hadn't said much all day. Just kept asking why someone would do something like that. I didn't have a good answer. Told him the truth. I didn't know. I waited until the lights went out over at the Whitaker place. Then I got up, went out to the garage, and popped the trunk. What I had wasn't exactly illegal. But it'd get a message across. A giant roll of heavy-duty plastic sheeting. A few jugs of fish emulsion, stuff landscapers used to feed the soil. It smells like death. Rotten fish and wet garbage. A stench that clings to everything and doesn't let go. I also had a crowbar, a box of nails, and a few other tools I won't mention. I wasn't out to hurt anyone. That's not who I am. But I wasn't going to let him walk away after what he did to my kid. I moved quick. Quiet. Put on gloves. Lined the underside of his porch with the plastic, sealed it up tight so nothing would seep out. Then I poured the fish emulsion through a slit I cut near the top. It pooled there, soaking deep into the wood. The smell would start off faint. But once the heat rose, it'd spread. Right into the porch. Into the siding. Maybe even the vents. I didn't care. I also left a little gift behind. A sign, just like the one Mason had made for the watchtower. Same paint. Same lettering. Only this one read, "We see everything from here." I hammered it into the front lawn, right below his window. Then I went back home. The next morning, I sat out on my porch sipping coffee like I always do. Around 7:30, Whitaker stepped outside. I caught the moment his eyes landed on the sign. Then the smell hit him. He started shouting for Ellen. She came out gagging. He pulled out his phone, started barking into it while pacing all over the place. I didn't say a word. 2 days later, a cleaning crew showed up. They were wearing masks. By the third day, they were yanking up the floorboards from his porch. I overheard him yelling at a contractor, something about the stench seeping into the insulation. I figured that'd be the end of it. But I was wrong. About a week later, I got home from work and saw 2 police cruisers parked out front. One officer was in uniform. The other wore plain clothes. They weren't hostile, but they weren't exactly friendly either. Asked if they could come in for a chat. I said sure. Mason was at school, and my dad was out picking up groceries. They stepped inside and took their time looking around, not saying much at first. The guy in plain clothes finally spoke up, asking if I'd had any trouble with my neighbor lately. I just shrugged and told him we weren't exactly friends. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was that sign, the one I'd planted in Whitaker's yard. "Your boy make this?" he asked. I didn't say a word. Just stared at the image. He waited me out. "I helped him with the original," I finally said. "It was for the treehouse." "And did you recently place one like this on your neighbor's lawn?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "No." He didn't press any further. But then the uniformed officer chimed in. "Mr. Whitaker is saying you vandalized his property with hazardous materials. He's filing a report. Anything you want to add to that?" I kept my mouth shut. I wasn't about to lie, but I sure wasn't confessing either. They left without making any moves. No warrant. No handcuffs. Just a warning, if anything else happened, I'd be the first guy they looked at. That evening, I found my dad sitting out back on the porch. He had a cigarette between his fingers, first one I'd seen him light in years. "I know it was you," he said, after a long, heavy pause. I didn't answer. He exhaled slow, like he was tired of carrying something around. "You think you're helping him. But you're not." I glanced over, stayed quiet. "That kind of anger, that silence, it sticks to a kid. Doesn't wash off easy." I gave him a small nod, even though I didn't agree. Then he said something that hit me in the gut. "You're turning into the kind of man you used to despise." That one stayed with me for days. I found myself chewing it over, wondering if maybe he was right. Maybe I'd taken things too far. Maybe I should have just let it be. But just as I started second-guessing myself, it happened again. Only this time, it wasn't me. It was someone else. 2 houses down, the Aldridges had this little swing set out back for their grandkids. Simple thing, wooden A-frame, 2 swings, a tiny slide. One morning, they woke up and it was gone. Cut clean through. Left in a pile like garbage. Nobody heard a thing. Mrs. Aldrich stood in their driveway, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her husband was pacing, shouting into his phone, looking just as rattled as I'd been. That's when it hit me, this wasn't about our treehouse. Whitaker was doing this to anyone he didn't like. The moment I saw that busted swing set, something snapped in me. This wasn't a one-off. It wasn't some cranky old man mad about noise or fences. This was control. Whitaker wanted to dictate how everyone on our street lived. No laughter. No children. No signs of joy outside his window. So I walked straight over to the Aldridge's driveway. Mr. Aldridge was struggling to carry one of the beams, hunched over and shaking. He's in his 70s, so I stepped in and helped him haul it over near their shed. His voice was soft, like it hurt to say. He told us we cluttered the view. Said we didn't ask permission. It was for our grandkids. He whispered. They're 5 and 7. That night, I called a neighborhood meeting. 7 families showed up. A couple with toddlers. A young married pair. The Aldridges. A single mom from across the street. Every single one had a story. Barking dog complaints. Letters about code violations. Surprise visits from city inspectors. Anonymous calls to the HOA. And every path led back to Whitaker. Noise complaints. Paint color objections. Someone even got fined because their car's tire touched the curb. And the worst part? Nobody ever pushed back. Whitaker always managed to toe the legal line just enough to avoid any real trouble. And folks around here, they don't like conflict. They just wanted quiet, peaceful lives. But we didn't have peace. We had fear. So we came up with a plan. Nothing shady. No destruction. No threats. Just community. We decided it was time to make him uncomfortable. Show him what it's like living around people who aren't trying to please him. Every kid got a box of sidewalk chalk and turned their driveways into art galleries. Folks played their music a little louder. Someone dragged a drum set into their garage and played on weekends. The Aldridges strung up twinkly lights along their fence and had their grandkids over every day after school. And me? I rebuilt the treehouse. Not a copy. A new one. Bigger. Brighter. Bolder. And I added a motion-activated spotlight to it. So if you were looking out from Whitaker's window at night, that thing lit up like a signal flare. I knew he'd try something. I was counting on it. Sure enough, a week later I caught him. It was 2:17 a.m., I remember because I checked the clock right after I heard a metal clank, like a tool hitting a fence post. At first, I thought it was just a raccoon. But then I saw him through the back window. Whitaker. All dressed in black. Bolt cutters in hand. Creeping toward the rope ladder. The spotlight hadn't gone off, he'd snuck in through the side lot, dodged the sensor. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the baseball bat by the back door and walked out barefoot, heart thumping. I didn't yell. Didn't have to. He saw me and froze, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. And for the first time since I'd met him, he looked scared. What the hell are you doing? I asked, voice low and shaking. He fumbled for words. It's a hazard, I was just. You take one more step, I'm calling the cops. He backed up. One step. Then another. I have a right. No, I said, firm and final. Not anymore. You come near my family again, and you'll wish I had called the cops. He stood there a moment longer. Then dropped the bolt cutters and turned around. I called the police anyway. They showed up about 20 minutes later. I gave a statement. They found the bolt cutters where he'd dropped them in the yard. And best of all? I had it all on video. From a camera I'd hidden behind the shed, one he never spotted. I figured that would be the end of it. But a week later, Whitaker hit back. Filed a restraining order against me. Claimed I'd threatened him, said I was harassing him, stirring up trouble in the neighborhood, making his life miserable. He even brought photos of the new treehouse to court, said the spotlight was targeted harassment. And somehow, don't ask me how, the judge actually granted a temporary order. Said we both needed to cool off. That meant I couldn't come within 100 feet of his property. Which also meant I had to tell my son he couldn't play in his own backyard anymore. That night, my dad sat me down. No raised voices, no lectures. Just a calm look and a quiet beer between us. If you want to beat a man like that, he said, you don't swing at him. You bleed him slow, the same way he's been bleeding this neighborhood for years. So that's what I did. Quiet. Careful. Patient. I started with the permits. Filed a public records request with the city. Took about a week, and I had a stack of documents showing every little project Whitaker had touched in the past 10 years. And there were problems, missing permits, expired ones, a patio extension too close to the lot line, a retaining wall that was never signed off. All little things, but enough to raise some eyebrows if nudged in the right direction. So I started nudging. Sent a few anonymous tips to the zoning office. Nothing big, just some questions, some photos. Then I dug deeper. Found this Facebook group for local contractors and real estate folks. I asked some friendly questions about fence codes and property setbacks. There were code enforcement guys in the group. I made sure they saw the pictures. Within a month, 2 inspectors showed up at Whitaker's door. I watched from my porch while they walked around his yard, snapping photos, writing things down. He followed them, face red, voice loud. He got cited. Then fined. Then hit with a formal notice to fix or tear down the patio. I didn't stop. Someone, could have been anyone, filed a complaint that his fence was on public easement. Another one flagged a drainage issue with his downspouts. Each report chipped away at him. Slowly. Officially. On paper. And while that was happening, the whole neighborhood started to turn on him. No one waved anymore. Kids crossed the street to avoid his house. Someone egged his driveway. I don't know who. I didn't ask. The best part? I never laid a finger on him. Everything I did went through channels. All of it above board. All of it with a paper trail. But it broke him anyway. I remember one morning, I saw him just standing there, out in his front yard, staring at the Aldridge's house. No noise. No commotion. Just watching, like he was waiting for something to go wrong. Then one night, something did shift. His wife left. I saw her drive off in an overstuffed SUV. She didn't come back. Neighbors said they'd been arguing. That she couldn't sleep anymore, what with the stress, the inspectors, and the lingering stink under the house, no matter how much bleach he poured on it. She told someone he was obsessed with us. That he wouldn't let it go. The next morning, a for sale sign went up in his yard. It should have felt like a victory. But it didn't. That same day, Mason was up in the treehouse, sitting on the deck, a book in his lap. He didn't say much, just stared over at the Whitaker house, then down at the yard where all the broken boards had once been. I climbed up there and sat beside him. He didn't even look up. Is he leaving because of us? He asked. I didn't know how to explain it. Technically, yeah. But not because of Mason. Not really. And not in any way that'd make sense to a kid. He made a lot of bad choices, I finally said. People just got tired of putting up with it. Mason nodded. Stayed quiet. A week later, the moving trucks rolled in. 2 guys hauling boxes while Whitaker stood around barking orders. No wife. No friends. No one helping. Just him, still in his button-up shirt, still trying to look like he had control of something. He never looked at me. Not when he stepped off the porch. Not when he got into the truck. But I watched him leave. Not with pride. Not with anger. Just worn out. That night, my dad and I sat on the back steps again. He handed me a beer. You win? He asked. I didn't answer. Because honestly, I wasn't sure anymore what winning looked like. I stared at the treehouse, lit up in the dark, and thought about how it all began, a simple little project between a grandfather and his grandson. Something good. Something pure. And now there was this hole around it. This ache. All because one bitter man couldn't stand the sound of kids laughing. Sometimes I wonder what Mason's gonna remember years from now. The treehouse? Or the man who tore it down? Maybe the dad who quietly made sure he never got the chance to do it again. I haven't told him everything. And maybe I never will. But when I see him up there now, legs swinging off the edge, just watching the world like it finally belongs to him again, I think one thing, over and over. It should have never taken this much just to feel safe in your own backyard.